writing on the death of one of both this and the previous century's greatest monsters, of a man responsible for the deaths of millions, former Tory MP, Afghan hiking enthusiast, and aspiring podcaster Rory Stewart tweeted the following. I challenged Henry Kissinger 35 years ago on Cambodia, and was stunned by how defensive and angry he could be with a schoolboy. But when he invited me to his house in Connecticut recently, I found him sharp, courteous and provocative, a centenarian charged with ambition, determined to remain at the centre of events. Despite his recent reach into AI, he seemed still to blend the spirit of Bismarck with the philosophy of the Cold War, often overweening but never not serious, never easy on himself, others, all the world. Herein lies the monstrosity of Henry Kissinger. Feted by liberals, right-wing psychopaths like Richard Nixon, and bloodless technocrats alike, he ascended to the limits of human ambition atop a mountain of skulls. On his suggestion or command, men, women and children died in undeclared, unsanctioned carpet bombings in Cambodia and Laos, from diseases caused by Agent Orange, and in the prison camps and unmarked graves of Pinochet's Chile. Hundreds of thousands more died in East Timor, where he kept up covert arms shipments to Indonesia, bragging to his murderous hosts, the illegal we do immediately, the unconstitutional takes a bit longer. All this in service of an American empire, an idiot colossus astride the world, causing death and destruction so that its coddled middle classes can go to Disney World carefree under the mass slaughter manufactured comfort blanket of international security, and its entitled fail sons can continue to inherit wealth beyond the dreams of emperors. Such actions, once worthy of a place on the gallows, were but a vague annoyance for the powerful elite he surrounded himself with his entire life. The corpses and the stench of blood but a fly to wave away while champagne flutes were raised in his honour. The dark talent of the man was not devising a real politic of murderous expediency, free from morality, decency or conscience, but the ability to cloak himself in such respectability that not once did the executioner's noose ever truly become a threat. Had those who employed him, sought his counsel, and fawned over him ever condemned the ghoul behind the easy grin, they would have been forced to reckon with their own willing complicity in murder, rape and torture on a global scale. It is no surprise that here, at the flailing, desperate tail end of the mercifully dying British Empire, his scions can be found still bending the knee to this genocidal titan of military-industrial byproducts. Stewart's fawning tribute shows Kissinger's rage at being challenged even by a child, but yet his fawning admiration upon Stewart's own ascension to power. To kick those beneath you and suck up to those you consider equal is the consummate sign of the bully. Had he, in the words of Rory Stewart indeed, never been easy on himself, then he would have found for himself the most painful form of suicide ever devised, or handed himself over to any number of countries whose citizens wished to, nay, deserved to see him rot in a dark jail forever. He did not, and instead he lived out his latter days as an elder statesman. Rarely have such words been so perverted. The Tibetan Buddhist tradition knows the idea of the tulpa, a creation of reality through spirituality and concentration. While he never received his justice in this life, we can only hope that the millions of us who are uplifted by his death can, through sheer force of will, create an endless, burning hell for Henry Kissinger, and eternal peace, grace, and love for those he helped murder. Rest in piss. Hello and welcome back to Podcasting as Practice. I'm David, my pronouns are he and him.
I'm James, my pronouns are they and them.
I'm Jamie, my pronouns are he and him.
I'm Rob, mine are he and him.
And I'm Alistair, my pronouns are also he and him.
And we are joined tonight, someone who has finally been able to give us the, I don't know, what's the triple cup? I don't know what the fuck you would call it, although there's the problem members. Alice Caldwell-Kelly, welcome.
Thank you. My pronouns are she and her. Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure.
You're welcome.
It is about time.
Glad that my missus will finally stop accusing me of being discriminatory for only ever having Roz and Liam on.
That's a very funny thing to do as a matter of policy, to be like, yeah, we love Well There's Your Problem, we're only gonna have the guys on, you know?
Yeah. So
got to keep the she/hers off the podcast. So
thin end of the wedge. Some of you are being transgendered. You don't even know it. You know, you're all gonna be she/hers this time next year.
Oh wait, it does work though. If we're just really angry with you all episode, we can just refer to you as they them, and problem solved.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. If I've really pissed you off, you can hit me with this person. You know, this guest. This guest really thinks that
the sixth Mike has an opinion. Well, yeah, lovely to have you here, and for such positive reasons. We love to have positive reasons to bring guests on.
I was sort of the pitch to me for this one was, do you want to come on and talk about a bunch of really depressing shit? And of course, always, you know, very, very, very familiar, you know. So this is kind of much of a much-ness for me.
Well, hopefully we've not spoiled that too much by introducing you to the second truly gender-neutral toilet on the Earth.
Yeah, that's right. We have Thatcher's grave, now we have Henry Kissinger's grave. So, you know, absolutely universal access.
Do we know that
to bury him, because I was fully convinced he was going to get Bin Laden.
Well, they just buried him at sea. I mean,
yeah, just kick him off a boat. Fuck it.
Have you ever read Hunter S. Thompson's eulogy of Richard Nixon?
Yes, no, I'm not smart enough to read.
It's very good.
He suggests flushing him down a storm drain, and I think we should bring that back. You know.
I don't think buried at sea would be enough. I think they're gonna have to fire him into the fucking sun if they want no one to tamper with the corpse.
I mean,
we sent Henry Kissinger's corpse to space as a warning. Just Henry Kissinger's dead-ass body in space, rigor mortis into a T-pose with a post-it note on his sternum that says, "Do nothing this guy did."
Imagine he comes back like the first Star Trek film.
Yeah, this is like a Khan Noonien saying origin stories. They defrost and revivify a spaceborne Kissinger.
But do you imagine being the alien civilization that first, receives those golden tablets where we wrote some shit on, being like, hey, those guys sound interesting, and the next airmail they get is this frozen corpse with a post-it saying this guy's an arsehole.
The list of objects that humanity has put into space that are gonna outlive us as a species: Voyager 1, Voyager 2, a Tesla, and Henry Kissinger. That's a really funny piece of cosmic littering. The sort of piss bottle thrown from the window onto the verge of the stars.
I was going to say though, imagine they get the Voyager probes and they go, oh yeah, we'll go and visit them, and they're on their way, and then the next thing they see is Henry Kissinger just smashes through the windscreen.
You get bird strike by Henry Kissinger.
They then call it Kissinger syndrome.
It's what honestly, he would have wanted.
Maybe I'm with David. I'm more in favour of firing him into the sun, but I am a little worried that doing that is what triggers the events of the movie Sunshine. I wouldn't put it past Henry Kissinger's innate darkness to turn out the sun, frankly.
Henry begins an undeclared war on the sun.
We've always been at war with the sun.
I mean,
the most orange of all agents.
The plot of Sunshine is that the Americans are sending a big bomb to the sun, so yeah, it would make sense.
What is the sun but a kind of solar system Cambodia?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Americans have had it all. They've had the core, and they've had so bomb the center of the earth, bomb the sun, and whatever will they come up with next?
Bomb the big asteroid that would otherwise destroy the earth. That's been a couple of movies.
Maybe we get a
Laos is very nearly an anagram of solar, so
maybe we get a weird fusion of the two, and it's Henry Kissinger fuses with the sun, and he forever smiles down on us like that baby.
Does the fusion dance from Dragon Ball Z with the sun?
You just kind of look up in the sky, and the face of the sun is now Henry Kissinger's face in a kind of Teletubbies war crimes crossover.
Weird director.
The Tubby custard machine, but it produces napalm.
Well, so did the original, to be fair.
I don't want to see the Tubby TV in this universe. I think it would be too harrowing, frankly.
Implying the existence of a kind of like Teletubby Robert Capa taking photos of napalmed Teletubby kids.
Yeah.
I think you
The
can't
Tubby
explore this
TV,
stuff
but
too
only-
much, maybe.
The only sound that ever comes out of the Tubby TV is Adagio for strings.
The fifth Teletubby joins the cast and they're just bright orange, and just like don't ask any questions about that.
What does a landmine do to a Teletubby?
A demilitarized zone around that little hill they all live in.
Again, the thing is, when you asked me on, it was like, oh, we're going to be talking about like landmines and Civil War and shit. I'd like to see you make that funny. Well, do you remember CBBC's show The Teletubby?
The yellow and red Teletubby have seeded.
Well, Tinky Winky was always very susceptible to the Muslim Brotherhood,
Sunny and Shia Teletubbies.
Dipsy committed suicide in the presidential palace today.
Oh, well, before we get on to more of the same, because I'm sure the Teletubbies, much like war crimes, will return, inextricably linked topics there. But before we do that, Rob, have you got some more local news?
I wanted to talk briefly first that, once again, our schools and our prisons are showing a certain amount of overlap in the Venn diagram. There was a very good but very grim piece in Education Uncovered by Warwick Mansell, which is well worth reading. And this is, he wrote a long piece about a delightful academy called Astraea Academy Woodfields, which has operated a delightful new policy to stop pupils from going to the bathroom too much. And that is by physically locking the gates with shutters. Once you see...
No Piss November extends through the whole school year. The thing is, right? I often try as a member of a transgender minority to explain to cis people that anti-trans stuff it doesn't ever stop there, right? They're not after me, they're after you. I'm just in the way, right? And so you think that the trans bathroom stuff is just like a culture war stuff? No, this is the thin end of the wedge, and the wedge is making every toilet in Britain inaccessible. No more piss. It's over. Just hold it. The entire country. We put that on the flag in the middle. Just hold it.
Yeah, ever heard of Omaroshi? Well, you have now.
Put it directly in the sea with the rest of it.
If you want to piss in Britain, walk to the sea.
We thought this was all transphobic, but there hasn't been an existing public toilet since 1972. So presumably this is just the next part of the wedge.
You can like piece this stuff together. You can do like a red string conspiracy wall, and the answer that comes up again and again is that they don't want you to piss.
Sylvia.
Yeah.
If you're really proud of yourself and like a proud Brit for not pissing, you can get like a little thin yellow line patch to put on like your outfit.
It got really weird when the cops started wearing those.
Whenever we talk about public toilets, it always reminds me of the real tragedy of when I used to drive delivery vans for Asda. There was one public toilet in one area that you might deliver to on a shift that had one public toilet, and it was always a relief when you had that place on your route, right up until the point I went there one time, there was a sofa in it.
And what, it was watching you so you couldn't go?
Well, I stepped over the sofa the first time I encountered it, and then after that they just locked the fucking thing altogether. I was like, okay, cool.
I'm gonna need some more details about this bathroom. So are we like 2-seat, 3-seat? Like, did it have like one of the corner ones? What?
It was okay. Imagine if you will, the platonic ideal of the bathroom, which to my mind,
IKEA catalogue.
To my mind, the platonic ideal of the bathroom is the little cubicle thing from Roller Coaster Tycoon. It was basically exactly that, with one stall in it and a door. And you had precisely 15 minutes to finish your business, or you have that experience of being on the train and the door just opening in front of you to the world.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, I've also had this exact thing happen with the train door, and I think that's another data point on the no piss wall, right? Is if you insist on pissing, the door will also just fly open at random.
Well, I mean, like this thing with the Astrea Academy is like incredibly grim because it's not just about like going to the bathroom for a piss. It's like if you're a woman on your period, you need to get your parents to tell the school because otherwise they won't let you go if you are on your period. But like, so apart from the period stuff, which is like incredibly gross, this is part of like a much bigger trend in like a lot of schools where like going to the bathroom during class time is seen as disruptive and must therefore be banned or highly controlled.
It's cool how Victorian education just snuck back in when no one was looking.
Yeah, is this Burble Singh shit? Is she connected to this fucking school?
It's not, but she might as well be, because, again,
Can I do my first call to violence now?
Yeah.
Every academy is Burble Singh shit. It's all like this, where it's like, listen, if we're not allowed to make you like write on slates and cane the back of your hand, then you will never get a job at the business factory, a thing which it's still possible to do. And meanwhile, all of these kids are going like, no, fuck this, I want to be an influencer. There's no interface between these two things at all.
Yeah,
well, I'm glad you mentioned that.
Take the kids' phones away and replace them with like t-shirt cannons.
Well, we did a startup on TrashFuture about vape detectors in school bathrooms, but this is the step further than that, which is they can't vape in there if you do not let them in.
Well, we know what the real method to keep people out of the bathroom is to shove a sofa in that fucker.
Or makes for a very comfortable vape, though. So high risk, high reward. You know.
Oh yeah, the body load from that vape is just going to keep you there for the like
if you're vaping in like on the bathroom sofa, you're experiencing a level of luxury previously only accessible to like Ottoman sultans.
Go for the triumvirate and put the ScotRail door on the toilet with the couch in it.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say that like Astrea never allows people to be going to the bathroom because they responded to an email from Education Uncovered.
Yeah, you can go to the bathroom, but you can't use it because you got to queue up behind every other fucker who needs a shit.
Pretty much.
Wait, listen, you have to make certain that you absolutely want to use the bathroom by getting on a waiting list that's going to run about 5 to 7 years, and then at the end of that, we can like assess you to see whether or not you're still committed to using the bathroom.
And then 5 years after that, you find out that all the bathrooms are still closed. So, yeah.
Yeah. Before you go to the bathroom, there's like a brief psych exam. It's like, you know, what do you feel?
How do you normally piss? How do you normally shit?
Yeah.
Do you piss in a normal way or a weird way?
Yeah, what do you think about when you piss? Have you ever pissed from a sofa?
Let me read you like a little bit from this is in response to an email sent by a parent whose child generally had to like. It's at least implied that they had to wet themselves because they were not allowed to use the bathroom in like several times. This is the reply from Astrea Woodfield to the parent who. Let me just read it. Toilets are available for use at regular intervals throughout the day, from 8:15 to 8:25, 10:50 to 11:05, 1300 to 13:35, and 15:10 to 1700. This would just correspond to before school, during break time, during lunchtime, and after school. Of course, such limited spaces lead to massive queues, so that even when the bathroom is open, you probably won't be able to use it.
And if you miss the slot, then you have to wait not just 2 hours for the bathroom, but like 5.
In some occasions, yeah.
Which is a strong amount of like holding it to be doing, I would say.
I hated school, and I always thought to myself, what would make this experience more tolerable is if the bathrooms were like a fucking festival.
Being soaked with your own piss.
Yeah.
All the kids should take up a coffee and smoking habit. That will solve the problem. Get it all out the road.
Halfway there already, David.
So, like, the parent of this particular child obviously, like, wrote to the school and said, my child soiled themselves and was...
Yeah, you sent me back with a pissy child.
Horrendous. What the school then did was, instead of, you know, apologize and revise their frankly insane policy, is revise the in-classroom CCTV footage and accuse the child of lying.
What?
Mm-hmm.
we're a step away from like hooking up electrodes to these little fuckers and being like, interesting. Your child claims to need to use the bathroom. However, our data, which is being fed into some like sinister American like billionaire neo-Nazis AI training data, is telling us otherwise. You know,
I'm assuming
piss database.
I was going to say, I'm assuming there's some startup somewhere that's trained in AI to like watch CCTV and tell you if anyone involved is pissing.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what this
You
is
can tell the difference between a piss dance and a Fortnite dance.
I mean, what
It's a little known startup called, I think it's Pulantia, something like that was what they were going with.
Yeah.
No, I mean, what
doing
this
a
is
Fortnite dance to air dry your own piss off you.
I mean, what this is just an extension of like that maniac, like Amazon fulfillment center, policy.
Yeah.
You know, it's exactly the
piss.
same thing.
No
Well,
pissing.
I think the kids should just piss in the classroom. They'll soon
Well,
change
they
the
are,
fucking rules.
you know?
They'll
They
soon
are.
change the
Dirty
fucking rules
protest
then.
the school. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But don't worry,
I'll argue with
Australia Woodfield did justify its policy. This is the last bit I'll read of it. By using the toilets at these times, scholars, that's their word for,
Scholars!
kids,
Okay.
scholars
I
are
fucking
able...
hate this country.
Yeah, each one of these children is going to open up their own fucking...
Portion shop.
I'm getting the Hanging Gardens of Babylon mixed up with the Library of Alexandria for some fucking reason.
The hanging library, very inconvenient. The thing about academies, right, is that they all do this shit of like, we're gonna incorporate some grammar school or some public school stuff. We're one step away from Burble Singh making them dress up in the fucking Christ's Hospital gowns, but it's always weird and wrong, and they always have like a slightly wrong Latin name, and then you just go, well, why are you doing this? And the answer is, well, they're going to need to do that in the workplace, to which the answer is, fucking what workplace?
Yeah. This dickhead doesn't even know it's pronounced Australia. Fucking idiots.
Yeah, I went to Australia Academy. Australia Academy locks the barbecues between certain hours. It's really inhumane.
Rack off me piss.
You can only use the ute between the hours of...
You're getting the ute to school.
Yeah. So
Thanking the ute driver.
By using the toilets at these times, scholars are able to make the most of lesson time and not miss out on the expert tuition we offer. Equally, lessons
You don't offer tuition, you're a teacher. Teachers don't tuish. You teach. Fuck.
Equally, lessons are not disrupted by scholars leaving for the toilets when others are trying to concentrate and succeed. It is the expectation in many forms of...
Maybe things have changed since I was in school, but I don't remember like getting up for the toilet and like Fortnite. Well, obviously not, but like Fortnite dancing down the aisle to get to the fucking toilets. Like, how much of a disruption are these kids causing?
It's vitally important that they concentrate and succeed, because the school's probably got them all rigged into fucking jigsaw traps or something.
I have to get up and go to the bathroom. It's a shame I'm wearing my tap shoes.
Yeah.
It's all just fundamentally because they have to ask the teacher for permission to go. If they were free to just get up and leave the classroom quietly, then no one would be disrupted. But the fact that
there would be chaos, James. Don't be silly.
You mean you could just leave?
You would be treated more like an adult. You know, it would be closer to non-Amazon workplaces in that respect. Like,
well, I'm glad you mentioned this, Alice. Let me read you the last line. It is the expectation of many forms of employment that comfort breaks are taken in line with this approach, or indeed in longer intervals.
Wow, I wonder if there's any distinguishing factor between a teenager and a fucking adult.
I mean,
it's probably not great that we're not letting the adults piss either. Like,
both are bad, but bad in different ways, or similar ways, but more extreme ways. I
didn't think that the kind of like labor rights union fight of the coming generation was going to be, are you allowed to piss at work, or do you have to hold it until you get home?
Yeah,
pissing at work is the new wanking at work.
Oh yeah, the unions fought for wanking at work. I mean, they had British Rail was decimated by the wank strikes.
Well, I'm going to shamelessly jump on this. Like,
I think
no,
basically the
stop
employment
it. I
of
have
the
to
future,
jump. I have to
all
do
the
this.
all the work uniforms will be still suits.
Right, I am
From
jumping on
desperately
this.
gasping
to
for air there.
fasten your steel toe cap boots desert style.
Right, we will never get a better jump from one topic to another than this. That's because there's one more bit I wanted to discuss before the main topic.
After all, like that one last week from like the fucking IDF cum retrieval squad into like death and destruction was pretty fucking good.
Close. So the online safety bill recently passed. You know, this was to protect the small children from all the bad things online.
Yeah.
And as part of that, all internet platforms now are being demanded by the UK government that they themselves stop minors from accessing harmful content. This, of course, includes pornography.
Or just hide all the harmful content in the school toilets.
Yeah. And just lock it in there, you know?
Yeah.
But
I
now,
know, we've left the sofa in there with all the pornography.
But now, of course, there comes a question of, well, how is that to be done? Well, Ofcom recently provided its guidance.
In the stupidest way imaginable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they were told time and time again to kick this bill into the long grass because it was all the ways of implementing it were not only impractical but also stupid. And I'm
Or impossible, right?
so excited to find out which one they've gone for now.
Well, there's four options, one more delightful than the other. So the government is demanding that this is done through age verification by sites like Pornhub and others. So there's not a central portal run by the state. It's up to the companies to do it. The four methods are they can scan ID documents like passports, which is easy and delightful. They can do credit card checks.
You get a stamp in your passport if you do that.
They can check if age restrictions have recently been removed from a mobile phone. I'm not sure how that proves how old you are, but you know.
What if you've turned 18 and you've removed the age restrictions?
The last option, though, is certainly the most delightful. This is from a piece on the BBC website by Chris Valance. Facial age estimation technology that will scan users' faces.
Age estimation.
Mm-hmm. That's really dark shit because like all of this other stuff of like going, you know, you have to go to the post office and apply in writing for a license to wank, right? Fine, whatever, silly bullshit. But like the Home Office is constantly in deportation fights where it's like looking at someone who claims, often truly, that they are a child, and then the Home Office goes, no, you're not, you are 46 years old and we are going to deport you to wherever the fuck. And
at least you'll be allowed to look at porn on the way out.
Well, exactly. And having the software there that's able to like estimate age, however unreliable it is, you can point to the Home Office using it for this and say, listen, we used state-of-the-art technology to determine that you are actually 46 and not 12 and therefore get deported. So
yeah, state-of-the-art technology, i.e. the same technology you use at a fucking American fair where you're trying to estimate how many jelly beans are in a fucking mason jar.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. But don't worry, Alice, they've thought of all this. This is another quote from the same article. For systems that compare a photo ID, such as a passport with a user's face, for example, they should do a liveness check to guard against children who try to use a borrowed or fake ID and a photo of someone older to fool the system.
Drink verification can to continue. I just...
a liveness check is incredible, though. Like, so you know what I mean? It's just going to be kids uploading GIFs.
I think blanking might be too much work now. Like, I kind of don't want to do it
AI
anymore.
or whatever.
I mean, the upside of all this is that
Free chug wellness check is really cursed just as a concept. Like, are you sure you want to be doing this?
The only truly...
Are you back again already?
Jesus, you have stamina.
Pornhub just like lightly shaming you by being like, listen, are you okay?
It's like
God,
in
I'm now
casinos where
imagining-
they have to check on you every so many hours.
Yeah.
You know that guy who got like the email from Netflix because he's been watching The Office for like a week solid, just in the background on repeat? Do you imagine getting those from Pornhub? That would be quite an experience, frankly.
No, I imagine that with
the
Pornhub,
gooning
like
community in shambles.
The screen.
Yeah, we noticed you've been watching The Orifice for a week.
With Pornhub, I imagine that like the screen just flashes bright red and says, you know, like this session has lasted more than 4 hours. Please consult a physician. You know, it'll just
Make me.
But of course, this isn't happening. This is too idiotic, and but even if it happens, even if it partially happens, imagine all the IDs and the personal data of hundreds of thousands of porn sites, all of whom are very reliable. The websites and the hosts and the people behind them, and of course the endless potential for blackmail, fraud, outing people's sexual preferences to all and sundry, and anything and everything along those lines. It's a fucking horrifying piece of legislation.
Yeah.
Good thing it'll probably not happen though, because it's on par with that fucking we'll make numbers illegal.
Yeah, I mean,
when they try to ban encryption.
It's also
chemicals. That's now verboten. You can't have chemicals anymore. We've heard of dihydrogen monoxide, and we are not fans of it.
The bit in the new Psychoactive Substances Act that accidentally banned coffee for a week or so. Yeah, I mean, I think the other reason this won't happen is that it touches too closely on stuff that Tory MPs like to do, in the same way that they tried to ban poppers, and then were like, no, hold on a minute, hold on, we need to think about this very carefully. There are too many Tory MPs out there gooning who will be incriminated and put into a kind of database for this to be plausible. I think
this is the kind of policy that you would realistically hear talked about by Tories but never implemented by them. But Labour would be
will
all
implement
over
it.
this shit.
Oh yeah,
you would have to slot your ID card into your computer on a special port.
Everyone has to get
like
those fucking NHS keyboards.
I was going to say those keyboards they have at the job centre.
Yeah.
I used to have that when I lived in Belgium. It was mandatory to access some of your state stuff. That you'd have to have USB card reader and plug your ID permit in to log into certain things. So you could literally use such a function, because then you could have ID cards, so that Labour could combine ID cards and no wanking.
Mm-hmm. Don't give them idea. Starmer listening to this and the light bulb going on.
Well, if they're still listening,
I think ID cards that you plug into your computer is a good idea, because then, do you know what I mean? Instead of just phoning old people and telling them that you're Bill Gates and they need to turn their computer on for you, you'd have to at least come down from their ceiling like Tom Cruise, on a bit of wire. And
I've just had the image of Tony Blair unbidden appear in my head, giving it the "Hello Smithers."
Did it put you off?
Oh, I did, yeah.
Maybe that's what they flash up on Pornhub when you've been at it for 4 hours, just Tony Blair's face.
Tony's worried about you.
The rare crossover event between Tony Blair and Ceiling Cat, yeah. Anyway, so beyond all that, let's now talk about something that's truly very funny and delightful, and also one of the reasons that I asked Alice to join us today. So, as we might remember from last week or 2 weeks ago, David Cameron is once again back in government, specifically as Foreign Secretary. And apart from all the delightful pig jokes that we once again got to dust off, I thought it'd be important to talk maybe about his single biggest foreign policy achievement, credit, whatever you want to call it. And I think it's also because it's basically
imagine having to install a fucking liveness check in the pig's head before he talks it.
It's also because I think the bombing campaign and the subsequent destruction of Libya as a functional country reigns one of our sort of less well remembered adventures into creating absolute foreign policy disasters on and human misery on a truly impressive
rare
scale.
Ed Miliband W.
We genuinely memory hold this one, and thanks for any opportunity to flex the foreign policy war studies bullshit, because this is genuinely wild that no one seems to think about it at all, and no one seems to remember this.
Yeah, I think we've also sort of mainly managed already to memory hole stuff like Afghanistan, and we're not allowed to talk about Northern Ireland whatsoever because the brave boys.
No.
But this one just
fine
seems
now. We fixed it.
That's been great discussing war crimes lately, and opposition to war crimes as a British value. Where it's some of the stuff that we did in Northern Ireland and what we did to then cover it up, very, very familiar in a lot of ways. But
yeah. But what I found interesting when I was reading about this is it is also the sort of last gasp of sort of war liberalism under like a Nobel banner.
Muscular liberalism. Who's got that on their bingo card? Because that's an old one.
The responsibility to protect stuff, like we're not doing this because we're just psychos who lust for the blood of brown people. We're doing this for noble reasons.
I do feel at times a little bit ambivalent about Libya in this way, and I think part of the reason why is because, much like Bosnia, you had this situation where your muscular liberals were very, very, very excited. They were plugging their like ID cards into their keyboards to jerk off to the idea of like finally having a war that like on its face was justifiable, and then going, all right, let's fucking do it. Let's all the way,
And the other thing one that Hillary Benn went hard for, isn't it?
Yes.
The other thing I found really remarkable is like when reading up on this is like it because this all happens in 2011, and even then it is truly like astonishing to see how little like the UK and France and the US learned from their recent own handiwork in Iraq and Afghanistan, and just like dove headfirst into yet another Arab nation without understanding anything of its cultures, its politics, its religious makeup, or really much of anything. Like all the stuff I've read is like they all say, oh yeah, nobody understood Libya. Nobody knew what they were doing. They were just throwing bombs around. Nobody knew what the fuck that country was.
It's a kind of like muscular liberalism, like campist thing, right? To say, Bosnia, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, all of them exist in the same kind of like moral landscape, which is, do you think it's good for us to be bombing other places? If I tell you it's a good idea, yes or no?
Yeah. The other thing that I found remarkable, again, certainly in comparison with Iraq, is the same thing happened. Like the David Cameron government and the Sarkozy government were heavily influenced by these like Libyan emigres who all wanted to like have Western powers invade and then use that invasion to vault themselves into power. It's what we did with Ahmed Chalabi again. But 7 years later, just teed up. It's incredible that no lessons were learned.
It's the Evergreen Onion article title, right? This will just stabilize the Middle East for years to come. Versus no, it won't. Like,
yeah.
So, like as a sort of broad outline, I briefly want to talk about like the pre-Civil War and pre-NATO bombing campaign history of Libya, because it is it's a fascinating country. The Civil War itself with the NATO/UN intervention, and then what happened after, and specifically also what didn't happen after. So like in terms of like, let's just start on like a brief of like pre-history of modern Libya, and like I'm wildly glossing over a whole bunch to present something vaguely coherent and not
sure.
here for 70,000 hours. So Libya itself is basically cobbled together out of the ruins of the Ottoman Empire. It basically three of its old provinces. Tripolitana in the west, Fezzan roughly in the south, consisting mainly of the desert, and Cyrenaica in the east. Basically, the east-west divide remains very, very important. After World War II, the French and the United Nations basically installed a monarchy under King Idris I, but he only cared about the eastern half, about Cyrenaica. It was at the time...
Yeah, everyone forgets what Idris was up to before he had his first breakout role.
It is very funny that at that time the kind of like post-war historically progressive move from colonialism is, check it out guys, we're going to give you a king.
Yeah.
Revolutionary.
I mean, it was also, back then at least, one of the very poorest countries in the world when it was put together. Not just because it, as then yet, had no serious natural resources, but also because the desert wars were fought significantly. Tobruk, for example, in World War II. So the whole country was...
They hadn't yet had the EU come up to them to give them vast sacks of money to do... let's not go into detail.
There. The detail on that will come later, though I'll spare you a lot of that detail. is and basically what happens is in return for like aid and sort of amount of state building, particularly from the United States, they said, well, we'll give you money, but only if we are allowed to use army and air bases in your country, specifically by the UK and the US, because of course there is no such thing as a free lunch.
Americans love an airbase like nothing else.
And you get a counterbalance to Egypt, which is the important thing, because this NASA guy, we got some problems with him.
Yeah, he doesn't seem very very nice or particularly well
stable. Yes,
putting a guy on the moon, don't trust it.
But basically Libya stops being a very poor country once oil is discovered in the late 50s, early 60s. It swiftly becomes a major exporter. It's still the country with, I think, Africa's largest proven oil reserves. And it
it's this kind of like natural resources trap of your economy develops entirely into the petrodollar.
Yeah, it does so very quickly under then still King Idris, and of course it has all the hallmarks of every other rapidly developing resource-trapped petrostate, which is a small upper layer that gets incredibly rich, and corruption runs rampant, and not much is shared to the people below. But then in 1969, in one of the not uncommon officer coups in the broader Middle East, Muammar Gaddafi overthrows King Idris in 1969 while the king is abroad in Turkey for medical care. They take over, and basically the king doesn't come back because otherwise they would have killed him. I think he ends up dying in Egypt in exile, basically.
It's sort of one of your classic North African coups, and very gentlemanly in a way. As you wait until the guy's out of town, and then you call him up and you go, "It's Jova, stay there."
Yeah,
Don't come back.
Your holiday's now permanent.
National leaders really should not go to Turkey. It never works out in their favour.
Yeah. The BBL that Idris was getting in Turkey, came at a huge cost.
But launches
he was lying there with a
career,
massive ass, totally white teeth, going fuck, fuck this.
I'm also not entirely sure whether or not the CIA and MI6 knew of the Gaddafi coup beforehand, but they definitely were okay with it going ahead. But both of them definitely knew
69.
Something.
Ask me in 17 years when it's declassified. You know.
Yeah.
Apparently, though, the British were backing a different faction, like a different group of colonels, and Gaddafi just basically got there first, which is an incredible side note.
You want a colonel, and you got different colonel.
Yeah. Also, speaking of the more personal, the man Gaddafi at the time, a extremely very handsome colonel. I mean, Google those pictures, good looking guy.
Doesn't last, doesn't last, which is a shame,
Yeah. I mean, but at the time, with that,
for sure.
Should have done a Stalin.
Smouldering.
Big mustache. Yeah, it's a shame.
What third wayism do to it, MF?
He then, he accretes to himself many titles. My favorite one being that he called himself the brotherly leader and guide of the revolution, which was his official title for a while. Which I think I will also style myself the same.
Gaddafi ideology is really, really interesting because it's a total it's an idealism of convenience, right? And so if you want to, suck up to the Soviets a bit, you're a leader of a revolution. If you want to suck up to the Pan-Arabists a bit, you're a leader of an Arab revolution. And it just it's quite flexible in that way, pragmatic even.
Neutrality with extra steps.
In terms of its pan-Arabism, he goes so far as to almost create Tom Clancy's Ultimate Nightmare by creating a sort of super state with Libya, Egypt, Sudan, and later joined by Syria. And they state their intention to form one unified state. It doesn't go much of anywhere, but it just puts me in mind of Tom Clancy books, basically.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing about Gaddafi is that he had this tendency to the grandiose, which is very funny.
Yes.
And so he would announce these things, and often people would sign on to them. The opposite of this is in his later years when he goes a bit more nuts, where he tries to partition Switzerland, which I do support doing.
They've had it too good for too long. Carve that mother up.
It was to trigger the libs at the UN. He proposed dividing Switzerland between Germany, France, and Italy.
His UN shit's always the best. I will visit the UN, but only if I get a big tent.
Yeah, man loved his tent.
Man, not only just a tent, a bulletproof tent as well, because he didn't trust hotels with, I think he was right
Walls.
to do so.
Not a fan of rigidity.
It should also go without saying that briefly he was also trained by the UK military, because we trained everybody.
Yeah, I want to say he went to Sandhurst, but I'm not sure if that's true.
He didn't go to Sandhurst. He was in regimental training.
Well, that's the problem. Had he done that, he would have been a lot more normal, I assume.
Yeah, basically, Gaddafi begins his rule by specifically tossing out the Italians, a lot of forced emigration as well as basically ejecting the UK and the US from its aforementioned military and air bases, as well as throwing British Petroleum out of its role in Libyan oil production. This was, of course, the bit that made him very, very popular in the West.
You don't have to hand it to him, but sometimes he doesn't make that easy,
Yeah, I mean he does continue sort of in like a weird sort of
Muammar Gaddafi, a land of contrasts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Like he does, like he sort of especially during the 70s and 80s, he continues to sort of be like a thorn in like NATO or the West's like side, because he keeps
gave people so many guns and so much explosives, fucking anybody. The IRA, the Bader Meinhof group, fucking you name it. The 70s were an incredible time, right? Because if you wanted to be a political terrorist, you either had access to like a suitcase full of money from the CIA for Operation Gladio on the Strategy of Tension, or you had Gaddafi's guys dropping off like a crate of AKs and going, okay, great,
Yeah, Acme crossed out on the side and Libya being underneath it.
Really like agent of chaos at this time, which I again, you don't have to hand it to him, but it's one of those things in geopolitics. It's not good, but it is funny sometimes.
There is an incredible story. This is in 1980s that apparently allegedly there's like a 4-nation dogfight in the skies over Libya, where
Ustica. Yeah.
It's Itavia Flight 870 that goes down, and nobody quite knows what happens to the flight, because apparently the US, France, Italy were all trying to shoot down not that flight but a Libyan plane that might have had Gaddafi on board, and the Libyan Air Force had come up like to the rescue. So there were like 4 nations.
Yeah, they shot down a MiG in Sicily. We did an episode of this on Well, There's Your Problem, the Ustica massacre. Yeah, absolutely. Also, in Gaddafi's military history, he fights my favorite named war, which is he goes to war with Chad. To the point that the US, he goes to war with Chad. The US has to like step in so the Chadians win. But it's called the Toyota War. It's the first use of the technical. Because these like early Toyota like Hilux and Land Cruiser trucks, people realized you could just like strap a crew served weapon on the back and just drive through the desert and embarrass the Libyans, and it worked very well.
Yeah, I mean that's like a long, like sort of the Libyan like forays into Chad and its politics are wild. That's like a whole story in and of itself. But yeah, like Alice, like you already briefly mentioned, like this sort of eclectic international politics of which he went under. It's a book as well called Third International Theory, which is kind of it's a weird fusion. Like it rejects Marxism because of its atheism. It rejects Western capitalism because it's
obvious reasons,
for the obvious reasons, but it's a sort of socialist nationalism that allows it to fuse with like forms of Islam. It's a weird mix.
Secret third thing.
Yeah.
the first Islamic socialist. He was not. But yeah. He
reading your copy of Capital facing towards Mecca, things like this.
Yeah, I'm often doing such things. But yeah, he had this book, The Green Book. It's sort of modelled after Mao, and it's a weird read. And again, sort of. Ideologically, you can kind of find whatever you want in it, so long as it's being obedient to the government of Libya.
Yes, yeah, that really was the main thing. Although I have to say, strong man for surviving as many assassination attempts as he did over the years. Uncountable numbers. The CIA, the French, the military, Islamic hardliners, pretty much like all of them tried more than once to get rid of Gaddafi, and none of them.
Rasputin eat my whole ass.
He's up there with Castro in the sort of like, the matrix of political assassination survivors, with like JFK at the bottom, where it's like bitch made got domed off effortlessly, to Castro at the top, where it's like Chad mode. They're putting thallium salts in my boots. Haters are seething. He's close. He's up there. He's past De Gaulle.
Yeah.
How seriously were the CIA taking that? Were they doing the exploding cigar shit with him, or were they like trying harder?
I think mainly they were
I don't know. Yeah,
I think mainly the CIA was like giving suitcases of money to like whichever faction of the military they could convince to give it a shot.
Libya had a surprisingly intense military, although it didn't really serve it well whenever it needed to. Like it kind of, they bought a lot of shit from the Soviets because
that's a very crucial bit. We'll get to the shit from the Soviets, but yeah, they had Libya is like a country awash with guns and bullets, like to a truly ludicrous degree. The main thing that's the interaction.
Sorry, just we're on the weird military. Was it Gaddafi who had the detachment of armed female bodyguards?
Yes, it was.
Excellent, like some sort of like mid-tier Metal Gear Solid boss.
Yes, yeah. Of the standards of personal weirdness, again, it's like it's no Charles Taylor's Gold AK, but it's up there,
I mean, there was that famous. That was when he went to meet Berlusconi in like 2002 or 2004, and he showed up.
They were buds too, yeah.
Yeah. They showed up he showed up in his full military uniform with all his female guards, and like instead of all his like his salad with all his medals on his chest, he had like a big picture of like a group of rebels that the Italian government at the time had shot. Like it was
I mean, my first thought when you mentioned like the female bodyguards is that's a clever move because Agent 47 can only take disguises from men.
But yeah, his main, not the only one, but of course one of the main interactions you get between the UK and Libya is of course the Lockerbie bombings and the subsequent UN economic sanctions, which are lifted after Gaddafi gives up suspects in that bombing. Whether or not, I think there's still like some questions as to what really happened there, but I didn't read up on it.
Yeah, there is. Yeah,
there's a lot.
But the Libyans also pay a certain amount of compensation to the families of the dead, and that lifts the sanctions and as well starts like a reintegration of Libya into quote unquote the West, specifically in 2003, because this is post 9/11.
This was a huge win for the like guy carrying a leather portfolio to work at the Foreign and Commonwealth Office.
Yes.
Who's like, yeah, we've brought this country into the international community again. They're like a staunch ally now, and how much of a staunch ally they were as we immediately started extraordinarily renditioning terrorism suspects to them.
Yes.
Yeah. The fact that like we sent people to Libya to be tortured, we did that like by order of David Miliband. The fact that we knew about it and we sent them memos saying like, hey, can you torture this guy for us? And they, Libyan intelligence would go like, yeah, cheers. That's one of the major reasons why you do not have to hand it to Gaddafi, is we knew perfectly well all the shit he was up to because we were taking advantage of it for like about a decade.
Yeah, I mean, this was, I mean, not the first British Prime Minister, I suppose, to have a deal in the desert, but this was the original deal in the desert between Tony Blair and Gaddafi. And apart from like a normalization of relationships, as well as a surrender of his chemical and nuclear programs, which in hindsight probably shouldn't have done that one, also, and the torture, of course, also included a $900 million oil exploration deal between the Libyan National Oil Company and British Petroleum, back on the scene after being kicked out by Gaddafi as well. And then, of course, you get what we'll talk a bit more about later, but also the reintegration with the European Union, who drop their sanction in exchange, of course, for helping with the small boats problem.
Also a lot of little corruption bungs, like all of a sudden, like the Gaddafi sons get to go to like the LSE,
yes,
or like play football in Italy, which was another weird one because he had one of his sons was a terrible footballer but got into a professional club in Italy entirely through uncorrupt ways.
Imagine being one of the guys that just like in the same class as like Gaddafi's children, or like on the same like lackluster football team at university.
I understand that going to the LSE is kind of like this all the time.
Imagine being like the one normal guy in that class.
Basically, like, I won't say everything's like normal and good, but by like the 2000s, so after all this sort of it reintegrates with the West, Libya is a reasonably wealthy country. It's up there with, you know, sort of the lower tier of the European economies. The UN ranks it really high for like human development. It's the highest in Africa. Like, people have incomes and jobs, and it's getting there. Like, you know,
it's the same. It's the same settlement as Saudi Arabia or the Gulf states in a lot of ways that they're now trying to diversify away from, which is we will have like extremely generous social services in exchange for no freedoms whatsoever, and you have a job where you work for the government, you kind of do nothing, and you're just paid to do that, which is fine if you can sustain it, but there are a few obvious problems there.
Yeah, the main obvious problem, of course, comes in... I'm skipping ahead in time now, but comes in early 2011, because this is when the Arab Spring happens, and specifically the first one is, of course, in Tunisia, so next door, where the protesters overthrow the dictator Ben Ali, and these protests spread over to Libya, particularly in the eastern part of the country, in Benghazi, in Misrata, in the Cyrenaica province, where the king originally came from. Again, this is that east-west split that you have to sort of keep an eye on, and this comes at a time of lower oil prices and therefore higher unemployment, as well as a sort of a pickup or sort of a more notice.
This was like, we were like sub $100 a barrel territory at that point, weren't we?
Yeah.
So cheap oil, less money for stuff, also a lot of corruption. And this is the thing, like, if you don't keep some kind of check on that, like affecting people, ordinary people, if you don't keep that to the highest levels, if you have to pay a bribe to like get a driver's license or whatever, or get your license for wanking in Libya, people start to get pissed off at that, especially if there's less money.
Or if the internet connection speeds aren't high enough.
Me as a Libyan, I'm the only person rioting specifically for like 5G broadband. You know, I want fiber to my door, and I have this AK, and I'm prepared to go out and get it.
The protests basically, as I said, begin in the east, specifically in Benghazi, which leads to the army opens up fire on protesters, and hundreds die. It's very, very ugly, and again, you don't have to hand it to Gaddafi.
The worst day
he was gonna create a United States of Africa. That's why they had to do it to him. And it's like, well, not exactly. This is the other thing about the Libyan military, is that they switched from in 2003, because, you know, no more Soviets. They were still buying some stuff from the Russians, but we became a great exporter of shit to Libya, and the shit that we exported to Libya, Britain specifically, was not good. Our whole defense industry is like, we have a couple of big players like BAE, and then a bunch of little cottage industries that work out of like industrial estates making torture devices and like riot control devices, and all of those guys were selling to Libya because the government put a big thumbs up stamp on it. So we were selling them the fucking thumb screws and the tear gas launchers that, you know, they were using before they moved into live ammunition, and when they did, we were selling them the sniper rifles from Accuracy International.
Yeah. I mean, Britain, as always, plays its own extremely ugly role when it comes to the arms industry.
We should only be allowed to sell things that don't do harm, like the Ajax.
I mean, along with the French, who also have like an incredible like arms industry and, you know, no moral conscience whatsoever.
Libyans asking why there's a fucking flag with a microphone and a sickle on it.
A reasonable question that you might ask, were you a Libyan who was being shot at by your own government, is why do all of these guys have American, French, Belgian, British firearms shooting at me?
Normal reasons.
Yeah, why are the prime ministers of these countries talking about Gaddafi as a strategic ally? Why, when we break open the headquarters of the security service that abducts and tortures people, are there a bunch of memos like from people with .gov.uk email addresses?
Yeah, No, it's truly wild. It's also like wild how when this conflict gets started and when like specifically the French and the UK like start to get on their like moral intervention high horse, how quickly they forget or brush under the carpet their complicity with everything that went on in the years before. So basically, what happens in the timeline?
We really are such a like the UK and obviously America to I suppose a greater extent, just so fucking low rent. It's like, we're gonna invade this country because we kind of just feel like it, and also it'll generate a bunch of headlines which we really like. So who's to say if it's bad or not?
Yeah, or conversely, the earlier side of that, which is we are besties now because you have bought like 50 cattle prods from Baz torture devices that's working out of like somewhere in Essex.
Yeah. So a number of cities, again, specifically in the east, sort of go into rebel hands along with a number of army units. And they organize themselves into what is sort of a provisional government known as the National Transitional Council, or the NTC. This will later be recognized by everybody as the real government, shades of Venezuela. And specifically, because it really is like, to sort of get back to where we started, France under Sarkozy and the UK under David Cameron really get like their war hard on. Like they really, really want to prove they're big boys. And everything I've read about it, it's like those two drive it. It's not the Americans who want to do this. The Americans are like, okay,
yeah, I'm sure Nick Clegg was also beside himself.
Sure. Yeah.
But Sarkozy is an interesting one too, because he tried to make this his legacy while being as corrupt as Gaddafi was, and that being the thing that sort of like ended up being his legacy is getting arrested and indicted for various corruption.
He is still slated to go back on trial in 2025 for allegedly receiving $50 million from Gaddafi for his 2007 election campaign. That trial is still to be held.
These hoes truly not loyal,
So in sort of shades of what we see now, certainly with Palestine, but also all the excuses that we heard around Iraq at the time. One of the things that David Cameron claims that it's necessary to institute a no-fly zone because otherwise Gaddafi would fly in mercenaries, along with unproven claims of massive civilian massacres and other tales of horror that are basically spread, like I said, by emigres with a naked desire to take control in any.
Imagine being a Libyan Gusano. What the fuck?
I mean, this is the thing, the like complex bit, in that, like Syria, you do have a thing where it's like, no, the government really does not give a fuck about human rights, and it really will kill you. But on the other hand, the evidence for this is coming from places that you have to approach with some skepticism, and we signally failed to do that because we wanted to do the stuff that we did anyway.
No, the no-fly zone was only implemented because the West was terrified about the revolutionary power of the 3rd International Brigade.
They were going to create a United States of Africa.
They were just about to get there.
They were waiting for that last signature, and,
Yeah, it was a no-fly zone because they just fucking hate the offspring. Keep them out of Libya. They can't be trusted.
On 17th of March 2011, the UN Security Council declares the no-fly zone. But the resolution also specifically forbids foreign intervention on the ground. That's, of course, the bit that nobody fucking listens to.
Of course.
The no-fly zone was basically said to be necessary because everybody predicted, and I think they were probably right, that if they didn't do that Gaddafi's like regular army would have crushed the transition council. They wouldn't have won without first like a no-fly zone, but then of course very quickly after you get a massive mission creep because the commanders say, well, no-fly is all well and good, but Gaddafi's army isn't like, it has an air force, but that's not their party piece. Their party piece is wheeled vehicles and tracked vehicles on the ground. So they say, well, if there's a no-fly, there's also, they sort of spiritually extend that into a no-drive zone. So
and special forces went into Libya much
ULEZ.
The ULEZ. But no,
doing season 3 of The Expanse shit where you just keep lowering the speed limit.
but both Britain and France put special forces into Libya much sooner than either of them acknowledged, and Britain immediately, we got owned on this one because we sent in some SIS guys and an SAS team to guard them. They flew in to meet the rebels, and the rebels immediately went, "Who the fuck are these guys? We will immediately arrest you and record all of this on camera phones and disseminate that footage," which blew the whole thing wide open and was very embarrassing. But otherwise, yeah, nobody seemed to notice the mysterious, 6'4" guys named Gaz walking around with anti-tank weapons.
Yeah, with anti-tank weapons and new necklaces of ears from a different culture.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Much of this UN resolution is driven by the French, because they really the UK and David Cameron, they want their big foreign adventure. They want to also for domestic reasons, but the French really want it. And why they want.
Why would the French want to do things in Africa, Rob? That's never happened before.
Sarkozy looking at a map and, with sort of it dawns on him that Libya is in Africa,
So the motives of the stated motives are, of course, liberal interventionism, deaths of civilians, and so on and so forth. The real motives are laid bare in
and not whether or not they're going to cause or stop them leaves up interpretation.
Is in a diplomatic cable from then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's advisor Sidney Blumenthal, who's an overall massive
all-time ghoul,
piece of shit.
All-time ghoul, yeah,
just deeply scary individual. And Sid Blumenthal explains Sarkozy's motives as they get it from French intelligence officers who paid them a visit. The first thing is that and this is a list of bullet points. The first thing the French want is a greater share of Libya's oil wealth, because of of course.
No.
They want to increase France's influence in North Africa, which unheard of. Why would the French want such a thing? And of course, because this is the French, and it's much as you were saying about Gaz and Baz, Sarkozy just wanted an opportunity to show off the French special forces and the French military.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the French equivalent of Gaz Baz is, but it's a great. A no-fly zone specifically is a great seller for Dassault, the fighter jet manufacturer. Plus, Airbus for some other stuff. So yeah, you can sell fighter jets doing that.
Yeah, and you can send the Foreign Legion out, you can get your Warhawk
Airbus, but it's the bus from the end of the Dawn of the Dead.
Well, they make the AWACS and stuff. They do all of the early warning stuff as well, and the surveillance aircraft. So yeah.
And specifically, actually, I know we were just making fun of it, but apparently the French really were worried about Gaddafi's plan for a stronger African Union, because they were really worried that would...
They bought the PR. They bought into it, for fuck's sake. They're just holy shit, this guy's gonna create a United States of Africa.
Yeah, I mean, what about Franc-Afrique is, of course, the underlying, question there. Not that it seems to have worked.
It's also the country that's currently being conned into putting Bitcoin into all manner of fucking social welfare programs just now. Yeah. So, nation of
Startup Nation,
forever and always.
Startup Nation.
Somebody should do a podcast about that.
Franceology.
It should, of course, be noted that none of these goals, and nowhere in these diplomatic cables is it written that they give a shit about protecting civilians and protesters in the eastern part of the country, or democracy, rule of law, all that jazz. It's just naked power grabs and in some ways it feels like a weird revanchism for the Suez Crisis, to show off that Britain and France can still get their war on. It has weird Suez vibes as well.
Yeah, just the Arab Spring kind of breaking on the rocks of geopolitics, and specifically what the West wanted to do about it, is maybe one of the grimmest things I've seen in my life, and that's an ever-growing list. And this sort of difference between the way it played out in Syria, Egypt, Tunisia, and Libya is a really stark one, because it's occasionally you can accidentally do something that is in service of greater democracy and prevention of massacres or whatever, and then you look at why, and it's because we actually believed him when he said he was going to create the United States of Africa.
Yeah, it's it's really mad, and like you certainly get a sense again from everything I've read that like they just wanted a foreign adventure. Like one of the stated goals that the French come out and say one of the reasons we want like a nice, quote unquote clean war is to because there's an election coming up. And if we could just show up and show off and do some bombing, and then the people will vote us back in. It's wild when they just say that shit out loud, like
Why can't they just be normal about it and like anthropomorphize the plane so everyone can just wank to that? Like, then job's done. Everyone enjoys the planes. They've served their purpose.
Also, shades of Syria here, where there was an absolute campaign to deny any possible Islamist influence in opposition to Gaddafi. Something which would later come back to blow back on Britain in the form of the Manchester Arena bombing, which is maybe one of our greatest intelligence fuck-ups in a long time, where we went, this guy who was fighting Gaddafi in the Libyan Islamic fighting group, he's fine. It's fine. He can come back in the country. Yeah, exactly.
The scariest outcome of all of that, though, Alice, was the fact that Jeremy Corbyn managed to say something saying along the lines of, "Hey, we're kind of responsible for this in a way," and people in the public going, "Yeah, he's probably right."
Given the depths of British involvement in the first Libyan civil war, I think probably much more involved than is ever going to become public. But that's my little conspiracy theory.
I mean, you also get like not just the British and the French, but also specifically like other Middle Eastern nations start, like Qatar, the UAE, Turkey.
Oh, this bit was fucking weird. Yeah, like giant crates of the most expensive submachine guns in the world would show up marked like, cheers, love Kuwait. And it was like, what the fuck is a guy in a country that's already like swimming in AKs gonna do with like an F-2000? It's like, great, thank you. This is worth $100,000. He will never sell this to anyone else, and you will not see it appear in like combat footage anywhere else in the world immediately.
Fucking
ISIS had some of that shit, and it's like, wow, surprising, How did these Islamists get guns from these other Islamists?
I mean, it's also an sort of an interesting internecine fight, because like some countries, I don't remember the full list because it's a shifting sands, but when the civil war properly kicks off, like Turkey and the UAE and I want to say Syria like back the Western government, and then others back the Eastern government, and it's this internecine fight within like the Middle Eastern region itself as well. It's this I haven't been able to fully work it out because it gets really complicated, and I'm trying not to do like a 5-hour podcast basically.
Sorry, you shouldn't have invited me on.
No, I'm happy to run long.
Yeah, stick some slides in. We can go for another hour and a half. So of course it has to be, because all these things now have to be, back in the good old days, like military missions, NATO missions would just like be given like a random name, like drawn from like a computer system. But now, of course, there has to be something cooler. So the no-fly zone and everything else falls under the NATO mission Unified Protector, which is
weirdly,
That's
some
so
of the
lame.
randomly generated ones were cooler. They had Acid Gambit in the 80s.
Yeah, and, that was great. Like, it's not as good as just like randomly pulling like Bakewell tart out of the hat or something, which would be much more fun.
And even fucking Market Garden's better than that.
Yeah, we have mulched like 30,000 civilians in defense of Operation Bakewell Tart.
Was it the Americans who started that with Enduring Freedom?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. The other things that they do, again, shades of Syria and shades of Iraq, is that the NATO nations and many others unfreeze like Libyan money in all the international banks and just dump it in the hands of like the Transition Council. So they end up with more than $30 billion to support the war effort. Of course, most of it immediately going out the door to buy Western arms, but
Yeah, no oversight on that whatsoever. And again,
we will learn
downsides.
nothing from this.
Memory. Sorry, I'm gonna just fucking dive in here. Memory unlock. I've just remembered something that happened in cadets when.
Okay, therapy session. Go on, David.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, not quite that bad. No, I remember being taught the orders process. And part of this was to be given the scenario and then to break that down into the set of orders to be delivered to a section. But part of the scenario was outright a Scottish resistance army that had to be crushed in the area of Gairloch Head, and I've only just remembered that now.
This is a bit like the entrance essay to Eton. That's like you are Prime Minister, you have just had to like order the troops to fire on the demonstrators. What do you say? Which
what do you say to justify it?
Yeah,
which is somehow worse.
At the same meeting where like this decision to like release funds to the what are then the rebel forces to give them a lot of money, Hillary Clinton, then Secretary of State under Obama, boldly claims that, this is a quote, "Increasingly the people of Libya are looking past Gaddafi. They know, as we all know, that it is no longer a question of whether Gaddafi will leave power, but when." Because, of course, at this point we are just nakedly stating our desire to murder, basically.
Yeah, so it's a war aim, and we set their war aim for them, which, fucking everything that has happened since you can trace back to like Hillary's time as Secretary of State. It's wild.
It's remarkable the amount of like weird shit, and and speaking of where we started the episode, another great friend of fucking Henry Kissinger, who it just never fucking changes. I mean, all countries are the same, but the limits of like American democratic input, specifically on foreign policy, are always fucking wild. Like it truly, in terms of foreign policy, it really is an imperial presidency, and not even a presidency.
Never underestimate the reach of. Never underestimate the reach of Hillary Clinton. Not only did she make such drastic changes to Libya, but look what she did to the Something Awful forums.
Listen, the online will never be the same. The goons are looking past low tax. They know, as we all know, it is no longer a question of whether low tax will leave power, but when.
They know, as we know, that low tax's spine will no longer sustain itself. There was another
Obama
into
Gaddafi's palace and finding a bunch of like $200 packs of cookies.
Yeah, Gaddafi had a lot of child support to pay. He was really depressed.
Warehouses full of mangosteen like you've never seen before.
No, I'm picturing them. I'm picturing them napalming the mangosteen groves in order to deny income, sort of thing.
Another Obama ghoul, Susan Rice, by the way, who wrote a book on human rights. I can't remember what it's called, but she's also a fucking monster.
Weirdly, for being a monster, it's like the Palestinian diplomat's best friend in the US government. Not because she does anything nice, just because she's like interpersonally gets them, apparently.
Yeah. But yeah, like, and sort of shades of the current genocide in Gaza. She was claiming that Gaddafi's soldiers all carried Viagra with them, so they could mass rape civilians in Benghazi if they ever got to Benghazi.
Again, like a lot of this stuff is like and obviously parallels there, as you say, where it's like. The truth is horrifying, but it's horrifying in a boring way, and a lot of the like baroque stuff tends to be, exaggerated in order to get you emotionally invested.
I mean, I'm not saying that like war crimes and crimes against humanity wouldn't have occurred, but these sort of the horror stories are fanciful as always, and designed to make you feel a certain way, and not necessarily true.
Susan Rice got me feeling a certain kind of way.
They are one of the few times, though, that your dad will believe the government when he's like posting on Facebook.
Yeah.
And then of course, because this, I remember that. Brief little side note, because it wasn't just like the UK and France and the US, although they played their part. There was like a sort of coalition of the willing, and like the Dutch also got their war hard on, and like what we did was like we sent one mine destroyer, but then Parliament said but it's not allowed to be in Libyan territorial waters, so we just like had it like bob up and down the coast for a bit and said
doing donuts off the Libyan coast to respect the troops.
Of course, it ends with the overthrow of Gaddafi, and quite famously, if it's a quote that some people still remember that Hillary Clinton, when interviewed about the death of Gaddafi in October 2011, literally said during an interview, "We came, we saw, he died." Which,
yeah, I mean, listen, I'm not going to say it's always wrong to laugh at the death of Muammar Gaddafi because I was just doing it, but yeah, there is a particular kind of bloodlust to do it when you are Secretary of State of the US, and Gaddafi died horribly, and again, I personally feel bad for the guy? No, but it blew back pretty horribly because one guy who was watching that was Putin, and Putin went, and this is like on the record, he's briefed this, is like, no, after that Putin's whole demeanor changed because he was like, oh, this is what regime change looks like. If regime change ever happens to Russia, I am getting like a bayonet up the urethra. Therefore, I can never ever lose the Game of Thrones, and I have to do even more of the stuff I've already been doing and demonstrate like maximum strength and maximum aggression. Otherwise, Hillary Clinton is going to have me killed, which I'm sure she would love to.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a great demonstration to the world, as ever, by the US of like, this is what we like, and then just being completely oblivious that other people, other nations are watching them do this stuff.
Exactly.
Much again parallels with Gaza.
And I mean, it's kind of this thing of like, Gaddafi had a lot of people killed in his time. He had a lot of people tortured in his time. But there's this kind of distinction of people who matter, right? That gets made whether you like it or not. And if you consider that what he did to his predecessor was wait until he left for the office and then, go just stay there, and compare that to being sort of like lynched on video. Leaders across the world take a lesson from that, which is, oh, the US is just out for blood of, me personally, someone who is not supposed to be allowed to die like that.
I mean, this was also at the same time, like right after the death of Gaddafi, you also get the I can't remember which one it is at the moment, at that time anymore, but one of the Kim dynasty in North Korea also vastly accelerating like their nuclear testing, because they were so this is what happens if we give that shit up.
I mean, that reminds me of when Matt Christman and I think it was he can't be named.
When Matt Christman vastly accelerated his nuclear program.
went on some podcast with like...
Pod Save America. It was the Pod Save America.
Was it Pod Save? Yeah. And basically them saying to him, should North Korea have the bomb? And him saying, well, yeah. I mean, like, from their own point of view, of course they want to have a nuclear... Like, the only thing that might deter the US from invading and doing a regime change to you is the threat of nuclear annihilation, maybe. And, like, it's... Yeah, like, you have to think, like, what is America going to do when they actually have to face someone who's nuclearly
well, they don't go
armed?
Look at North Korea.
Yeah.
Pronounced nuclear.
Yeah. Among the other things that would come to bite everybody back in the ass is two things. It's they overhyped the threat posed by Gaddafi itself, but also that the NTC was incredibly unstable and contained significant factions of various stripes of Islamic extremists. This is from a good House of Commons Foreign Affairs Committee report that I read for this. This is evidence given by the former chief of the defense staff. This is a quote. He added that a quorum of respectable Libyans were assuring the Foreign Office that militant Islamist militias would not benefit from the rebellion. He acknowledged that with the benefit of hindsight, that was wishful thinking at best. And I would say... You don't say. You don't.
Yeah. Well, if they were assuring you, I mean, the thing is, again, I sympathize a bit. There is no opposition to like a North African dictator of the period that does not contain Islamists. Right? They're the largest oppositional force. But if you don't acknowledge that, then you have like no way of controlling it. You have no way of having any kind of like reasonable expectation or debate of like, is this a like proportionate thing to do at all? Yeah, again, just makes me very sad. Same with Egypt, where it's like, oh, it's gotten too Islamist, and then we got scared, and then just like installed the same guy with a slightly different haircut.
Have you got anything Islamist? No, that's too Islamist. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this could all have been avoided.
this could all have been avoided if he wasn't the boy who cried Pan-African government.
Yeah, if he hadn't tried to create the United States of Africa. I don't know, there was this, like, very brief glimpse for, like, I don't know, maybe 6 months at the outside, where it seemed like the people who actually lived in these countries and did not have golden AKs and bulletproof tents might have some kind of a, like, vote in this whole process. And then, you know, the doors just, like, slammed straight back shut on that because of our beloved material conditions, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it's also like, it wasn't like the sort of during the fight against Gaddafi and his forces that like these tensions with like the sort of more extremist fringes, militias, was like sort of subsumed. It was incredibly obvious because like even during the fight against Gaddafi's, one of the Islamist militias assassinates the leading war general of the NTC, a guy called Abdel Fattah Yunus. So like it's not like we couldn't have seen it coming. They did it during the conflict itself, you know, whilst Gaz and Baz were there taking ears. It's really remarkable. Again, like I want to stop talking about like the actual like conflict itself. Basically, this is by reading a little bit. This again from the House of Commons Foreign Affairs Committee report. The result was a political and economic collapse into militia and into tribal warfare, humanitarian and migrant crises, widespread human rights violations, the spread of Gaddafi-era weapons across the regions, and the growth of ISIL in North Africa.
And this is the thing, right? Diminishing returns, where you can do this shit in Bosnia, for instance, right? And then decide, okay, well, we're going to do some state building, and the state that results is like, as we're seeing now, extremely precarious, and you have like an EU bureaucrat that makes all the decisions, and kind of nobody's happy with it, but there is at least like some function administratively there. Whereas here, the same people, literally the same people in the same offices, just got bored and thought, right, you know, she'll be right. I don't need to do anything. Yeah.
Let me read you one last bit this is from the same quote. Through his decision-making in the National Security Council, former Prime Minister David Cameron is ultimately responsible for the failure to develop a coherent Libya strategy. I should also note on the side that, by the way, that when the House of Commons committee was doing this report and interviewing everybody showed up except David Cameron because he said, I'm too busy, my agenda's too full.
Well, if Tony Blair didn't need to face consequences, why should he?
Yeah, I mean, if anything, he should be rewarded and made General Secretary of the UN, as he's been like making motions towards.
NATO, wasn't it? Is it? I thought that because
was it NATO? Oh yeah, no, you're right. You're right. It was NATO.
Which, you know, given what we're now discussing, you know, a good portent for the future if that fucking prick gets in.
Oh sure.
So, sort of turning to the last bit of the Libya, what I want to talk about, like what happened after, and specifically what did we not do after, and you know, basically what we didn't do after is everything. We just like dusted our hands comically and then said, you know, well, we're not in charge of rebuilding or like state building or, you know, putting something coherent together. That's
we tried that in Afghanistan and Iraq and it was too hard, so
the UN.
Well, now I'm not doing it.
Yeah, exactly. We maxed out our capability to like create a state, and as we have seen in Iraq and Afghanistan, those were not like hugely sustainable either.
Like, small bean Britain spent all of its spoons invading 2 states prior.
Literally, yeah. We ran out of spoons, and again, if at any point during the sort of like talk about this, there had been the consideration that this would be a like multi-generational project of totally rebuilding like a Libyan state in any kind of accountable way, but no one had any interest in doing that. They wanted Gaddafi out, you know, some share of oil, some, you know, arms sales, and then so long as the result was kind of like acceptably chaotic, then fine, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, the attitude of the Foreign Office specifically to, like, where people said, well, now we have to do reconstruction and state building and, you know, we have to, as you say, be there for a while to make sure that we clean up our mess.
Versus, no, we don't.
Versus,
international obligations if you're quick.
No, but that was the answer. The answer from the Foreign Office was, no, the rebuilding must be Libyan-owned, WHO then, of course, and supported by the UN, which they, of course, vastly underfunded and left undefended in what was swiftly becoming like a massive war zone. And if you want to this is from the House of Commons report. It's fascinating stuff. Unpublished House of Commons library research found that the UK spent some £320 million on bombing Libya and approximately 25 million on a reconstruction program. Just so we have our, priorities.
Swords to plowshares is just something that happens to other people.
So there are some efforts are made. There is the NTC, the National Transitional Council, sort of established a sort of relative transitional government, which does do what appear to be like reasonably free elections. Like there's not a lot of ballot stuffing and all that. I should say though, however, that like this free and fair election was done in a country that, of course, had no experience of functional democracy, political parties, campaigning. After 40 years of a Gaddafi dictatorships, and the parties were given quite literally 18 days to get their shit together, which,
Jesus Christ.
We just got bored. We just got bored.
We had our fun. We blew some shit up. Gaz and Baz have some more ears to take home to the family. And
it's like... You know how in like YouTube videos or TikToks, I guess, where it's like they just make a huge mess by like throwing a fucking like saw blade at a bunch of jars filled with gunk or whatever, and it's like, wow, that's amazing, and then like they don't show the 5 hours of clearing up afterwards, and that's just not the fun part.
Yeah.
What you're saying is that we would have successfully rebuilt Libya had we only affixed Family Guy funniest moments in the top right corner.
Yeah, rebuilding the Libyan state while playing fucking Temple Run.
Well, I mean, Gaddafi for a number of years underfunded the Libyan state's provision of Family Guy funny moments, and so when he was out, the administrative capacity to deal with that was not there.
A Mr. Beast.
I wonder if they translated Family Guy into Arabic.
I'm certain they did. Must have done, sure.
But I should say also at this point, even though there are these relatively free elections, quote unquote, the National Transition Council and the national government is already falling apart. The different groups within it are no longer contained by their war aims, so they start killing each other. And significantly, both the defense ministry and the armed forces, so like the nominal national organs, say actually we don't want like to create a national, civilian-led army. Actually, what we want to do is give all the guns and bombs to the militias we control.
But again, I don't want to cure cancer. I want to turn people into dinosaurs. Yeah, of course.
So of course that happens because, again, we didn't learn anything from Iraq and Afghanistan because, maybe not the exact same thing, but it certainly rhymes very well.
Well, I suppose it's not entirely true that we didn't learn anything. What we did learn is that we could essentially invade places more or less with impunity and then just kind of, kick a couple of bits of rubble over and say that we built a state and then fuck off after 5, 10, 20 years, however, just pick a number.
Mm-hmm.
What we learned was Land Rovers aren't very good, so we need some sort of viable replacement for the Land Rover. Enter the Ajax.
And 50 other bodged together things that we named after dogs. I love to ride around in my Mastiff, and then get TBI when it rolls over.
Yeah, that's the wonder of the Ajax. You don't even have to flip that bitch over.
Yeah, you can get a TBI just sitting in it.
You don't even have to be in it.
You have to be near it.
Having heard of it,
Yeah, the first cognito hazard IFE, yeah.
But then of course the first inkling that we get, or that certainly some parts of the world get, that not everything might be well, is of course the 2012 attack on the Benghazi consulate by
Benghazi ain't going away.
By Barack Obama himself,
he killed a something awful member.
Yeah, R.I.P. File Rat.
That's right. Just one of the about 90% of goons who work for the federal government in one capacity or another.
It also, of course, spawned an aftermath of wildly shit movies. We should do that Soldiers of Benghazi movie at some point. Maybe as a
we did fucking Kandahar. We know that was a mistake. We do not do films named after places anymore. Kandahar was bad. Greenland was bad. No more.
Yeah. Welcome to our new pod project, Kill Gerard Butler. It's an original idea. So then, of course, they pretend again that to become a real democracy, another transitional government is supposed to give way to a House of Representatives.
I'm sorry, it just dawned on me that the acronym for that is KGB.
Alright, it's back on the menu.
It's good again.
So yeah, the next elections again, they're supposed to establish the transitional government is supposed to give way to a House of Representatives at a massive turnout of 18%, which is great. And there's a little problem again, like the House of Representatives is established in the western half of the country around Tripoli, so the old capital, but large parts of the eastern country don't recognize that, and they still see the transitional government as legitimate. And it is at this point basically that the country splits not neatly, but like in half between the east and the west, between the old provinces roughly of Cyrenaica and Tripolitana. There is a real split line.
It's good enough for the Cold War. It's good enough for a small North African, well, quite a big North African country.
That's right. Civil War too.
Yeah, exactly. It's a second civil war breaks out with two dueling governments controlling or being controlled by various stripes of army, militia, and factions reorienting themselves around.
Yeah, this is kind of like the B-team civil war in Libya intervention stuff, where a lot of countries who do not have as much weight to throw around then throw some weight around. Like Turkey gets in on this.
So the House of Representatives, which I think is the one in the west, is backed by Egypt and the UAE, and then like the more Islamist continuity government of the National Congress is backed by Qatar, Sudan, and Turkey. So you have this sort of internecine warfare, like through the back door between all these various countries in the Middle East, which is always like, it's good to remember that like those countries hate each other as well, like to a truly interesting degree. We always think that they're just like kind of an amorphous blob of angry Arabic people, but they're really
weird
not.
Weird that United States of Africa didn't pan out.
Yeah.
It is, of course, at this point also that the number of like militia fighters, because this is also like at this point one of the few like jobs that will pay you money in the new Libya. Again, much like Afghanistan and Iraq, where a lot of insurgency fighters were just young men who needed to make money, and the militias pay, and then the government doesn't. So that's what you do. So the number of fighters goes from roughly 25,000 at the end of the war against Gaddafi to about 140, 150,000 by I think about 2020. So they're also not. We've alluded to it already, but like they are all notably incredibly well armed, not just because of the fancy crates that the Kuwaitis sent them, but mainly because like under Gaddafi, Libya spent about 30 billion pounds on weaponry, mainly light weaponry, and that was just like not used, but like still, I mean, they sent some to.
They ran out of cool terrorists to give it to. Like after the 70s, there weren't guys with leather jackets who are going to like hose down prime ministers with submachine guns anymore. There's no one left to give it to, so it just sits in a warehouse, and all of a sudden, 30 years later, people are playing Tarkov with it.
Yeah, this collapse in the supply chain is why that guy in Japan had to build his own contraption.
Yeah, I mean, the sort of like the AKs are very unevenly distributed globally.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad that like the last donor was like Bruce Willis, who mounted like a minigun in the back of a suburban soccer mom car. But remarkably, because we knew that like these guns were all like stored in like a bunch of these huge warehouses, and everybody knew what they were. But of course, we didn't. The one thing we didn't do was send Gaz and Baz and Louis to secure those warehouses. So they just
No, of
got
course
broken open, and then the guns ended up like all over Africa and the Middle East, and
we
fuck
kind
knows
of
where they are now.
internationally the like briefcase guys like to talk about arms proliferation as like something that happens, like a phenomenon, a sort of generalized thing like weather, and that's true to an extent, but it's surprisingly often traceable to these like singular events of like, oh, all of these warehouses full of like Ukrainian AKs or like, you know, Libyan RPGs have to go somewhere, and they do because people stop watching them.
Yeah. I mean, and it's remarkable because, like I said, we knew where these warehouses were. It really wouldn't have taken, like, you could have literally, if you want to send like the useless like gases from you know, the SAS in, it's literally just parachute them on top of these warehouses until you can send like, you know, a couple cargo planes in to take that shit away and then dump it in the oceans. As far as I'm concerned, like it really, but we just don't do that. We don't care.
It's where the inspiration for Fortnite came from.
Yeah, but we could have done that. We could have melted them all down, turned them into fidget spinners or whatever. But no,
it's really weird. V-Bucks are now the official currency in
we
in
could
Libya.
have brought all the AKs back, melted them down, and turned them into new AKs to give to someone else.
that's you know, that's real like skilled worker shit. I'm just thinking now how badly I want a fidget spinner made out of a melted down AK. Surely someone in Ukraine can make this for me on Etsy.
Yeah, if you're a Ukrainian artisan, DM Alice at Alice on
that's
Twitter
right.
and get in touch. And of course, then, you know, because this is the next time that anybody in the West sort of gives a shit or hears about Libya after we pull out and just leave that country to its fate, is when ISIS in the Levant emerges, or ISIL, if you will, which really we should have seen coming, because like even back in the like the anti-Gaddafi war in 2011, a lot of the more Islamist fighters were actually coming back from fighting in the Iraqi insurgency and in Afghanistan. So like
it's remarkable. Again, like discrete events. It's the same with the guns all being like you know, discrete and trackable things. The number of Islamist fighters who are ready and willing to like do this shit is like a fixed number, and it's much lower than everyone thinks. And they always bounce around between. Like guys went from Chechnya to Afghanistan to you know, back to Dagestan to Libya to Syria. It's remarkable.
It's truly wild, and it's also like, again, because it's such a small pool, it's also not like we don't know who these people are. You know, even in the desert in Libya, you can figure out, because they're, you know, they also announce their presence in all sorts of interesting ways. And of course, then what then further fuels the conflict is like some of the local militias, specifically in the south, but also in the east, you know, immediately pipe up and say to the Western governments, and you know, US, UK, and France in particular, hey, if you give us a whole bunch of guns and weapons, we'll just go take care of ISIL. Because it's a money spending opportunity for them. That, you know, they also want to get rid of them, but it's also like, you know, they will also use those guns and bombs to continue the second civil war that's raging at this point. And of course, you know, neither France nor the UK have stopped sending down Gaz and Baz and Louis to support different militias, but we only do that for two reasons: if the militias pretend that they're about fighting ISIL, or if they are the ones in control of the oil pipeline, because that's the only bit that we really give a shit about. You know, that's the only thing. Like everything you read, it's fascinating when you go through like the archives of. I skimmed through the Guardian and the Financial Times. It's like 50% of the stories are like migrants on the coast, and the other 50% is like militias in control of oil refinery. It's just like, okay, all right, that's what we care about. All right, cool. Of course, none of this is any good for like the people who actually live there. By 2016, incomes have fallen by 30%. Oil revenue down, and production's of course massively down because it's a civil war. And like the price of flour, a staple, of course, is up by a factor of 5. It's an incredible, like, if you, like I said, right before the civil war breaks out, or at least in 2003, like Libya was on its way to like being, you know, maybe the most developed country in Africa. I mean, you know, resource dependent and trapped in those sort of economic circumstances, but it was on its way to maybe becoming a real state, and now it's just it's fallen to
Thank,
shit.
thank God we intervened.
Yeah.
Fantastically, speaking of intervention, though, it is also in 2016 that I can't remember this. I think this. Oh no, this is from the House of Commons report on Libya, that the UK turns out to be informally discussing the return of the monarchy with varying Libyan factions. Which
gonna find another Idris.
Which, quote, receives far from universal support in Libya itself.
The sun having no alternative shone under nothing new, you know?
Yeah. I mean, without basically getting lost in some extremely deep weeds, the ongoing civil war is fueled by oil money, mainly being fought between these two eastern and western halves of the country with various militias, power brokers emerging, switching sides, and so on and so forth. And one of the things I know, I think, Alice, you mentioned on a recent episode of, well, there's a problem that you might want to do an episode about it. But one of the results that sort of I want to leave it on, except for one last bit, is in September 2023, so a couple months ago, two local dams above the city of Derna failed because of catastrophic rainfall from Storm Daniel, but also thanks to more than a decade of either negligent or no maintenance, and it kills 5,000 people and displaces 30,000 more.
Functionally destroys the city, which is sort of one of the consequences, and we have not seen even close to all of them yet. So
yeah, it's and of course, as it turns out, that apparently Gaddafi had contracted like a big Turkish engineering group to fix the two dams.
Yeah, to build the United States of Africa.
But the contract
it was located in the dam, so thank fuck that rain turned up.
Those two that contract was signed in early 2011, so never got around to doing it. The main
mysterious
contender,
Scottish man turned up. 12 years later, what happens?
And again, much like we did in Iraq and Afghanistan and everywhere else where we turn up and kill and mutilate and bomb people back to a hole in the ground. The most sort of strongest contender for being in charge of Libya is a guy called General Khalifa Haftar, and he is of course a former CIA asset with the support of France, according to the Financial Times, who has reappointed some of the security people surrounding Gaddafi. So everything that is old is new again, and the sun shines on brand new things.
If we need somewhere to have people tortured again, this is on the list. And then, whenever he alienates people again to the extent that maybe something happens, then it just repeats, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. But by all accounts, from the interviews that I've read and the statements that I've seen, like the people who live in the area that is under his control are like basically grateful that, people aren't shooting each other in the street anymore. But it is a violent, repressive dictatorship, and people get disappeared on the regular, and it's just
of course.
We made a decade's worth of mess and changed nothing. Apart that half the country, this is not the whole country under his control; it's half, and who knows if he will quote unquote win. So before I turn over and then stop talking about this, I do because of course this being normally a podcast about British politics, we need to talk for a moment about migration and small boats and being tough on criminal gangs and so on and so forth.
Yeah, the thing strategically that we need from Libya to stop the boats.
Yeah. To be fair, this is mainly, as far as I understand, a deal between the Libyan Coast Guard, for which read militia, and EU Frontex, which is just a horrifying organization.
Oh, yeah. Really sick motherfuckers over there.
Really incredibly fucking sick. At first, like in the first few years after the war, it's the Italians controlling the flow of migration. But when it's turned over to Frontex, the number of deaths in the Mediterranean increases by a factor of 30. This is again from the same House of Commons report. And deliberately, Frontex changes its marine tactics to specifically not do any search and rescue of migrant boats, because they say this would create a pull factor. If you're going to be rescued out of the water, you can just go. Whereas if you might drown, then you might not come. So, that's...
Yeah, I mean...
Because every safe crossing is one where there's a chance you'll drown. That's safe.
It's... this is from Amnesty International, from their regional director for Libya, Diana Altawi. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Even in 2020, the EU and its member states continue to implement policies trapping tens of thousands of men, women and children in vicious cycles of abuse and showing callous disregard for people's lives and their dignity. Because basically what happens, again, mainly through Frontex, but this is the stuff where like the UK and the EU are absolutely in lockstep, is they bribe they bribe militias and then move tens of thousands of refugees in small boats and from other routes back across the water into detention centers mainly in western Libya, which are run by various militias. Where I read a number of like horrifying personal accounts of people who underwent torture, forced labor, rape, especially young women and girls. I won't repeat it because it's too horrible. I'll merely say that according to one of the reports I read, the average price for a human slave in Tripoli or Tobruk is about $200 to $300. They are literally worked to death or sold on to the next factory, or
when you think that this is funded directly, pretty much by the
100%
fucking
directly.
EU, by the EU, and it just I know it's like basically beside the point, but just thinking about how deranged we went over being in or out of Europe for so many years, and it's like. Being in ostensibly, we maybe could have tried to do something about all this shit, but like this was happening. I appreciate that, but
tell him he can't go enslaving anymore.
and of course, like
those guys are partners in peace now.
Yeah, those responsible, like the people leading these horrendous organizations, including people with like warrants out for their arrest by what passes for a Libyan government, and people who are whose names are on UN sanctions lists, are known to be commanders and high-ranking militia officers, including those in charge of the refineries and the detention centers. So that's
you can still do all of the ISIS shit so long as you don't put an ISIS gloss on it. So long as you're not like doing any of the kind of like slaving for ostensibly Islamist reasons, then fine.
Yeah. Don't put Arabic writing on a flag. You're probably safe.
Yeah.
And when like the Tories and the Labour Party, brave fucks, of course, that they all are, talk about, stopping the boats and sending them back and ending the criminal gangs, what they mean is the people who are arriving, the destitute people who are arriving desperately on our shorelines and those in Europe, when they say send them back, this is what they mean. They mean slave labor, militia-run detention camps, rape, torture, forced labor, sexual violence. I mean, again, I had some hard times reading for this. I won't repeat the stories. If you listening wish to read them, there's plenty of material available. It's... And all of this, again, just to wrap it up, all of this happened under David Cameron. We broke...
And he's back.
And he's fucking back.
Hooray.
No consequences, not for this, not for the green seal shit, not for the austerity.
Not for austerity, yeah.
Nothing sticks. This fucking guy is just back. He broke this country. Him and Sarkozy. In any reasonable world,
we got to ascribe the appropriate amount of blame to Nick fucking Clegg as well.
Also, of course, but specifically those two, because from everything I've read, they were really the ones pushing this thing through the door. And I'm sure little Nick Clegg was there in his child seats with his little flag up, but like that.
Yeah, with the fake steering wheel in front of him. Yep.
Yeah, just And nobody gives a shit. That's what I find so remarkable, specifically about Libya. People certainly remember Iraq and Afghanistan, I think, and have a sort of vague, know that Syria was unwell for a while. But this is one of those things that just got fucking memory hold. And like, when's the last time you heard anything about Libya that didn't involve the word small boats or refugees or, things along those lines?
Yeah, it's one of those things that's been abstracted. Like the word Libyan Coast Guard is like just a spell that you cast to say, to this is how we're going to deal with this problem. I cast a spell, Libyan Coast Guard. Oh look, we've got rid of all these migrants, and then no further questions.
Yeah, I cast a spell over the welfare state. Look, AI, my work here is done.
And also, I would just like to add, Corbyn's 7 out of 10 for the EU. Being fucking generous, let's be real.
Yes.
Yeah, 100%. Before we do comment or commentary yet, I don't know if you've ever listened to this pod, so I don't know if you know the rules of the game. It's no shade if you haven't, because you're busier than
what is it with you and shade these days, Rob? Have you watched like 2 episodes of RuPaul's Drag Race and now you feel like
I'm bringing it back, I'm
just
retro.
change your life.
Okay, sure, yeah.
Okay, so Jamie has went away and found a bunch of things on the internet, and he's going to read them out to you, and it is our job to decide, are they a comment on a website, or are they directly from the mouth of the commentariat?
Fantastic. Let's do it.
Right. Sunak launched the most lavish furlough scheme in Europe with the best intentions, thinking he was doing individuals, companies and the country a service. But it's increasingly clear it undermined our motivation. We urgently need to rediscover our ambition and drive, not least to pay back the vast amount spent by this government during the COVID years. Is that comment or commentariat?
Commentariat.
Yeah, that's commentariat.
Yeah, I'm going to commentariat.
Got commentariat taste to it, hasn't it? Telegraph or Times, I feel
Got
like.
a clear call to action instead of just complaining, yeah.
That was Alice Thompson in the Times.
Yep.
Right. Wait till people find out the internet is recording all keystrokes, not just the final edited version of what you go public with. Is that comment or commentariat?
Comments. It'd be very funny if you tell me it was in, like, Wired.
Comment Daily Mail.
Comment Express. It's always one that sneaks up on us.
Express is a good shout for that one as well, yeah.
Yeah, comment Daily Mail.
It was a comment in the Daily Mail, you're right.
There you go.
It was in relation to the fucking scan your face for porn thing. Weirdly. Much necessary immigration, students, care workers, doctors and nurses, is necessary only because government interventions and price controls have so distorted the market that it no longer functions. Is that comment a commentary?
Could be plausibly comment or commentary, but if it's, I think commentary and I think Telegraph.
I'm going to say commentary at The Economist.
That's a good shout. I'm going to go comment just to be contrary. Let's go with comment.
I'm going to say comment as well.
I'm going to say commentariat.
That was Sam Ashworth Hayes in the Telegraph.
Oh.
Yes!
Yeah.
Get in.
I hate these cunts so much.
Before allowing access, a porn site should ask a couple of general knowledge questions, which must...
To access your pornography, you must answer me these riddles 3.
which must be answered within a couple of seconds to prevent web searches, but young people would rarely, if ever, know the answer to. History would be a good topic, as general ignorance of this is absolutely staggering, especially among the young. A beneficial side effect would be to increase people's knowledge. Is that comment or commentary?
Who remembers the milkman to get access to Pornhub?
I don't want to have to answer what the fucking diet of worms is.
I love it. It's just the question pops up is, do you remember when the bin men were hard? And it's like, yeah, okay, sure, I guess.
Like,
well, good, we got hard bin men for you.
Are you over 18? Do you know who David Seaman is? Do you condemn Hamas? I'm like, yes.
This is, I will say though, like this is not an original idea because for the really old fucks among us, the original Leisure Suit Larry, you couldn't play unless you answered general knowledge questions about history that people under the age of 18 would know, and I could never guess them right. It was really fucking annoying.
You can never ask where in the world is Carmen Sandiego.
I'm gonna say commentariat, and it's gonna be like fucking GB News or some shit.
I'm gonna say comment. This has the flavor.
I'm gonna say comment as well. If it's got that that specific degree of idiocy about it.
Yeah, that was another comment from the Daily Mail.
Was it under the same article about porn?
It was, yeah. Right. But his slavering over Thatcher this week shows Starmer to be a man doesn't actually believe in anything, but he will do anything to get into Downing Street, even if it means praising a woman whose head most of his party would have liked to have seen on a poll. No wonder his comment sparked a furious row inside Labour Party when members see their leader expressing his admiration for a woman who all but consigned their party to the wilderness for nearly 2 decades. Is that comment or commentariat?
Ooh, that's hard.
Commentariat mail?
Commentariat
I feel like
Telegraph.
the syntax of that has a commenty feel about it.
It's on the fence for me. It's
Yeah. It's one of those ones that
comment Guardian.
Yeah. It's got the reek of comment in the Guardian, but from someone who properly reads it for the wrong reasons. I'm gonna say commentariat.
Yeah, that was Caroli Maloney in the Express.
That's not a name.
Express. I would never have gotten the Express.
And a column was titled, "If Starmer really wants to be Thatcher, first he needs to smash the unions."
First, he needs to start taking estrogen, I would think. Yeah. But, okay.
Right, one more. Britain didn't give up at Dunkirk. Churchill did not give up even when, with the exception of the Battle of Britain.
We fucking did.
No questions until the end, thank you. Churchill did not even give up even when, with the exception of the Battle of Britain, we didn't seem capable of winning any battle at all. He knew he was fighting genuine evil, and he held his nerve even when cities were bombed and civilians suffered. Hamas is also evil and must be fought to the last man standing in its cause. Is that comment or commentariat?
Luke Hakehurst, twitter.com.
See, the first half screams comment to me, but the back half kind of suggests commentariat, and I'm not quite sure.
I think because of that back half, it's commentariat. Yeah.
Commentariat. Guardian.
No, it's the Express or something. It has a
I'm gonna say the
delightful
Mail.
form of bloodlust.
Commentariat GB News.
That was returning champion Anne Widdecombe at the Express.
Oh no!
Right.
And I'm gonna read you the title and subheading of this article and see if you can like spot the incredible lie here. Israel is right to resume bombing Gaza. It's the only way to stop Hamas. Subheading: It is not easy to say so, but I think Benjamin Netanyahu is right to resume the war in Gaza.
I mean, yeah, because of woke, you hardly ever hear that opinion expressed.
Yeah. I definitely believe it was hard for her to say that.
Good God.
Right, well, that's your lot.
Thank fuck for that. We do like to end an episode with the taste of blood in our mouths. So, once again, Alice, thank you very much for coming on. Welcome back anytime.
Thank you, yeah. I'll take you up on that.
We'll rope you in for more collaborations.
Yeah, please do.
Well, we do have Gerard Butler Greenland migration coming up.
No.
We're not inflicting out on a guest. No.
Even if we did, only Lila.
Well, I mean, Alice has been training. That's the only thing I'll say in her favour.
That's right. Yeah. I have the training weights on for this. Yeah.
Well, we have a lot of episodes coming out in the near future, just to make sure that we've got enough going for Christmas, etc. More so, if you are a patron. So for Christmas, why not forgo giving racist Uncle Gary something and get yourself a Patreon subscription. Patreon.com/PraxisCast will get you one extra episode a month, except over Christmas, where it will get you 2, maybe 3, I don't know, see how it pans out. And yeah, merch is available at praxiscast.tmail.com and
Alice, where can good people find you?
And Alice.
It's my fucking smoke alarm is going.
That's it. That's enough podcast for today.
That's where you can find me. No. So I do 3 whole podcasts. I do a podcast about engineering disasters called Well, There's Your Problem. I do a podcast about bad movies and masculinity called Kill James
Gerard
Bond.
Butler.
Called Kill Gerard Butler, and I do a podcast about tech and finance and politics called TrashFuture. You can follow all of those, and you can find me on Twitter at Alice Avazandum. Thank you so much for having me on.
Likewise, it was a pleasure. Thank you.
It's been great.
Bye, everyone.
Yeah, bye.
Bye-bye.
See ya.
All right. What a recording.